What is going on, my carnivore family? It's your boy Danny here, back with another episode of Unapologetically Carnivorous. How's everybody doing today? Now, most of you understand that punctuation is pretty important. It can mean the difference between telling grandpa to come eat and eating grandpa. Now, context is not just pretty important. Context is everything, and that's because everything changes depending on your available nutritional resources, the present state of your body, your goals, the speed and direction of changes which are already occurring in your body, etc., etc., etc. Now, in one context, that of, let's say, negative energy balance and negative nitrogen balance, or inadequate protein intake and inadequate energy intake, dietary carbohydrates are protein sparing. That is, they prevent the loss of lean mass and muscle tissue because of this effect. In another context, let's say that of excessive caloric intake, dietary carbohydrates then instead promote the very easy storage of your dietary fat intake. Now, in the context of the zombie apocalypse, I will be unapologetic about eating whatever it takes to survive, because starving, why wait? I'll be a canditarian if I have to. Now, I want to use our modern understanding of scurvy to explore this issue of dietary context. Now, it's rightfully understood that scurvy is caused at the biochemical and, let's say, micronutritional level as a vitamin C deficiency. It's also rightfully understood that this deficiency develops typically due to inadequate intake. Now, that is in contrast to inadequate absorption in the presence of adequate intake. Now, but what actually causes scurvy, right, in the ultimate sense at the level with which we're concerned, rather than in the proximate sense at the micronutritional level? That is, what could possibly cause scurvy in our modern macronutritional everyday dietary context that we live and operate in? Now, we all know in times past, scurvy was thought of as a disease that pirates and sailors got during the heyday of naval exploration and vassallocratic empires, because they didn't have any fruit on board. Now, we all might not know that we have to ingest vitamin C due to our inability to synthesize it the way that goats can, because we lack one of the four necessary enzymes, but we all know that we need to ingest it. Now, we might not all know that the biological half-life of vitamin C in the human body is 30 minutes, but we all know that we need to ingest it regularly because we understand that fundamentally we can't store this crucial vitamin. Now, we also might not all know that it's necessary for wound healing and collagen formation, right, or dopamine formation, but we all know that we need it because it's been hammered into us since birth. Okay, so to provide a little bit of historical background, vitamin C was first isolated in 1928 by a scientist who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for doing so. However, the effects of this vitamin deficiency were known long before that as the condition scurvy, right? In 1747, James Lind, a Royal Navy surgeon aboard the HMS Salisbury, conducted what is widely considered to be the very first controlled experiment, which means that this issue of vitamin deficiency that we're discussing actually spurred the beginnings, or the humble beginnings, of modern experimental science as we know it today. Now, what Lind did was take 12 men who were afflicted with the condition, and he divided them into 6 different groups of 2. In addition to their daily rations, these men each group received some measure of some other substance. One group received an amount of oranges and lemons, another cider, another vinegar, another seawater, and then another group a mixture of horseradish, garlic, and mustard. Now, the group that received the fruit recovered fully and rapidly from their condition. And from this, James, I guess, rightfully concluded that that fruit administration could cure scurvy. However, he also seemed to conclude that fruits could prevent scurvy. And we'll see why later on. This is an erroneous conclusion. All we really knew at this point was that the administration of fruits after the onset of scurvy could reverse the condition. However, the rest, they say, is history. And from that point on, the Royal Navy provided some amount of oranges or lemons, and especially limes, hence the phrase limeys, to its sailors. And in doing so, they successfully prevented and cured scurvy, at least according to, or in this nutritional context. So, The U.S. National Academy of Sciences Food and Nutrition Board has determined that you only need about 10 milligrams of vitamin C per day to prevent the onset of a deficiency. What this amounts to in the real world is the vitamin C content that's contained in about a tenth of an orange. So really, all you need to do is eat one orange a day and you're pretty much covered. Now, this chart shows a little bit of the actual complexity that's involved in figuring out RDAs and DRIs, which are recommended daily allowances, and dietary reference intakes, respectively. The actual amount that people suggest that you take for vitamin C each day or ingest of vitamin C each day is somewhere in the order between 60 and 90 milligrams, which is a little bit more than that orange. But is this really true? Is it simply inadequate intake of a few milligrams of this crucial vitamin that causes scurvy in the modern macronutritional context of daily life, which we're concerned with? Should we even be concerned at all with scurvy in the modern world? Does it still exist today? Is there such a thing? Well, it doesn't really exist, is what we're told by the nutritional establishment. It's sort of thought of as a communicable disease like polio, rather than the nutritional deficiency that it actually is, and we've kind of assumed that it's been eradicated like polio. But I've linked a very interesting Slate article in the description down below that shows that although it isn't super prevalent, that it does in fact still exist. Now, if you bring this article up that I've linked, you'll see that there was a patient who was clearly presenting to a physician with what was unmistakably the hallmarks or, the effects of the condition scurvy and the vitamin C deficiency. Now, the fact that it wasn't recognized as such is kind of mind-blowing. And if you read the article, you'll see that it says that they were stumped, all of the consulting physicians, until Churchill recalls, quote, someone eventually thought to ask about this person's diet. And so what I want to talk about is why there's some confusion surrounding this issue, and part of this confusion stems from the very same error in logic that Lynn made in the 17th century, which was excusable in Lynn's era. Lynn just assumed that since administration of fruit cured scurvy, it must also prevent it, and that since it did that it simply must follow that it's lack of fruit that it's the cause of scurvy. And in our collective understanding, we've followed Lynn's logic. Gotta get them fruits and vegetables to get your vitamin C, we're told, right? But lest you be prideful or cocky about it, because you already clearly see the error in logic that's going on here, let me remind you that one of the smartest men who has ever lived made a very similar error in logic. Linus Pauling was the man that founded modern chemistry by its mathematization, basically, and is the only man to ever win not one, but two unshared Nobel Prizes. Now, less well known is that later in life, Mr. Linus Pauling went a little batshit crazy and believed that we could cure everything, and I mean everything, including cancer, with massive intravenous doses of vitamin C. In 1993, after undergoing radiation therapy for prostate cancer, Pauling said that vitamin C had delayed the cancer's onset for almost 20 years. This is not a testable or a scientific claim, and if Linus freaking Pauling is not immune to these errors, nobody is, right? That's why we need each other, family, in our joint attempt at understanding the universe and nutrition. Especially. Other humans are our cognitive backups. You can't be afraid to be wrong, and you cannot be afraid to change your mind. And at its best, this is what YouTube is really all about. Sharing information, generating understanding, and changing minds. Okay, so back to the subject at hand. We've gotten to this point where we've advanced, or sort of see how we've advanced to this understanding that it's not eating fruits and vegetables that causes scurvy. But is that really true? No, it's not true. Is it not taking aspirin that causes a headache? Of course not. We should be able to see now, just from what we've discussed so far, how drawing this erroneous conclusion is the result of incredibly flawed logic. Today, looking back, we also have the advantage of a far more advanced and nuanced understanding of human biochemistry and a far more advanced understanding of how that biochemistry plays out in varying nutritional contexts. We also know from our study of history or dietary history of other peoples, right, that have lived or are living now in various or other nutritional contexts, that this is just demonstrably false. We should also be able to see by the end of this video how there is absolutely and cannot ever be such a thing as settled science, right? We can always gather more data, and that data might affect our theories, and those theories might affect the way in which we gather data. You can see where this is going. If history, in fact, had unfolded just a little bit differently, we might all, quite reasonably I should add, hold the belief, the collective belief, that eating raw meat is actually what cures scurvy. Now, don't laugh. Really, it does. Raw meat cures scurvy. It's true. Repeat after me, though. Context is everything. Now, I'm sure that more than a few of you have heard of the very famous study conducted in the late 1920s of the famous Arctic explorer, Dr. Stefansson, we'll go with Stefansson, who has an absolutely unpronounceable first name, and Carson, that's Carson with a K, Anderson. Now, I've linked to the study in the description down below, which you can read or peruse for yourself. This study was funded in part by the Institute of American Meatpackers and was carried out quite meticulously by the Russell Sage Institute of Pathology. Now, I can hear the broccoli-headed vegans in the crowd crying foul already, but you know what? They can put their money where their mouths are and fund a study of, let's say, an extended study of a broccoli alone diet, and I'd like to see what happens to 2 men on that diet over the course of a year. There were actually 3 men in this study, but only the 2 that I mentioned ended up going over a year. The 3rd man in the study only did the diet, or for a very short period of time, a very brief period of time, something like a month or something. Anyway, the study was a big deal when it occurred because it was supposed to actually solve all kinds of nutritional controversies that had arisen in like the previous 50 years. One of which was people had assumed that the all-meat diet would only work in a cold environment like it did for the Eskimos. I'm going to go over all of this in great detail in another video, but for now I just want to mention a couple of things. Firstly, take a look at this picture. Do you notice anything? This is how much vitamin C is alleged to be in a piece of steak. That's 0. The men in the study, however, were allowed to eat offal or organ meats, any meats really ad libitum, meaning according to pleasure, after a run-in period on lean meat alone. The run-in period for Stefansson was at the request of the Institute, despite the fact that he warned them that he would get sick on lean meat alone, which he promptly did after 3 days. When fatty meats were added back into his diet, he made a full recovery just as promptly in about 2 days. Now, it's really hard to find vitamin C info on beef liver for some reason on the internet. Maybe it's because the amount of vitamin C that's in beef liver is in dispute. I have a site saying there's 1.3 milligrams in a small serving. I have another site, that I had found a value as high as 30 milligrams in a serving. I believe that Chris Kessler has a great page full of info on beef liver, which I've also linked to in the description down below. There's a chart at the very bottom of that page comparing the vitamins in 100-gram servings of various foodstuffs. Well, guess what? In a 100-gram serving of beef liver, there's 4 times the amount of vitamin C that there is in a 100-gram serving of apples, right? Now, beef brain, which Stefansson has some serious cravings for, is over 60% fat and has about 40 milligrams of vitamin C in a large serving. Now, Stefansson had noted on his Arctic expeditions that there was no cases of rickets or scurvy, or very few, among the Greenland Eskimos, which were further north in Greenland, but large incidences of these diseases, both of them, among the Labrador Eskimos that they had done some exploring amongst. And they lived, these Labrador Eskimos, in contrast to the Greenland Eskimos who lived on a hunting and fishing diet, they lived mostly on preserved food, including potatoes, flour, canned foods, and cereals. In fact, Carson with the K. Anderson, the other subject of our study, had actually came down with scurvy on Stefansson's last Arctic expedition because he was subsisting on the Labrador Eskimo diet. Well, guess what? His scurvy was cured. Cured by eating what? You guessed it, raw meat. Now, it was simply not feasible to take raw meats and organ meats as rations on extended journeys in the 17th century. It was possible to take lime juices to ward off scurvy on these same journeys. In the context of the modern diet, where we aren't worried about these issues, what could possibly be causing the cases of scurvy the doctor from the Slate article was seeing? Well, it should be clear, based on what we know now, that subsisting on the modern versions of the processed, portable, and preserved foodstuffs that these sailors and pirates were subsisting on is our cause. That is, these grain products that we're told are healthy and should be the base of our food pyramid. Or, if you prefer the updated version from the propaganda arm of the grain lobby, the grain products that should make up 1/4 of our plate according to the USDA's My Plate. Another fourth of that plate is supposed to be made up of protein. Protein? What the heck is protein? Tofu? Ain't no vitamin C in that either. And there's basically none in cooked soybeans if that's your thing. The patient from the Slate article that we linked to in the beginning of the Slate article was eating nothing but white bread and American cheese for years. Another patient in the article had eaten nothing but ice cream for a few months. Refined foods like this are sorely lacking in vitamin C. Additionally, and we're not going to go into this too much, but compounding the problem is the fact that vitamin C and glucose compete for uptake by cells. Glucose, which these foods are chock full of, compete for absorption and uptake into a cell because they share the same pathway. Well, guess which gets sucked up first? Our old pal, sugar. So, what have we learned? Well, I hope that we've learned that we should always keep an open mind and understand that context changes absolutely everything. One man's superfood, say raw beef liver, might be another man's source of potential vitamin A toxicity. A high protein diet is great for those of us here at Unapologetically Carnivorous that are moving big weight, but it's not great for somebody with kidney disease. Vegan diets do not work for infants at all. Period. Full stop. Ketosis, right, is great for epileptics and for short periods for those trying to lose weight quickly. But it ain't so great for CrossFitters and weightlifters who are lifting at higher intensities. For an adult that believes it's wrong to eat animals, eating meat just ain't gonna work until he or she is convinced otherwise. So before we make any specific recommendations or nutritional recommendations to somebody, we must understand the whole person and the dietary context in which they're operating in. This isn't nutritional relativism. This is nutritional context. Anyway, let not him that eats despise him that eats not, and let not him which eats not judge him which does eat. This is your boy Danny here at Unapologetically Carnivorous, reminding you to eat real food as much as you want, mostly meat, including organ meats. Peace.